So just a quick demo of some techniques I think that are really going to help you if you struggle or start to overthink some of the wavy and curly hair and fur. And I think working up to something like this look of hair is a really, really useful exercise. And I think we can start with really simple. So I'd suggest just getting some scrap paper, don't overthink it, and just get into the habit of doodling with a purpose. So just think about the sorts of motions that are needed to create the sort of lock of hair that we've got here. So starting off from a point and just sort of flicking down, you can see that first one was used with a higher pressure. It does taper off a little bit to the end, but I'm definitely overthinking that. That was the first one I did. This one was done more rapidly. You can see it's softer. There's some variation in pressure and thickness in there. And just get used to sort of doodling and varying your pressure, even with a ballpoint pen like I've got this here, and just sort of creating that sort of sweeping motion. Start out from a point, and then when you've had a bit of a practice with that, so maybe you're watching TV or you're just sat in a meeting or on a phone call and you're just sort of doodling, I think it's a really nice exercise to just practice softening off your strokes a little bit. And then when you've done a few of these, you can start connecting them together. So we go in one direction. You'll find one direction a little bit easier than another, and then flick up from the other direction. And you see how they almost join. Keep practicing that. You see how none of these are perfect. None of these are going to look exactly the same. I'm not using a reference photo. I'm just moving my pen along the paper. I do find this sort of wave a little bit easier going in that direction. So I'll try in a different direction. I have to think a little bit more about how to get started with that. And then I can bend this round the other way. It doesn't have to be an envelope, just something to hand that you feel is quite accessible. Yeah, as I say, scrap pieces of paper, and just get into the habit of sort of creating those shapes and knowing how you move across the paper, whether it's with a pen or with a pencil. How do you create those soft tapered lines at the end? So what we want to move away from is drawing these curves deliberately and drawing these shapes with sort of an outline. So that's not what we want. What we want is to get used to flicking and letting it get almost the pencil or the pen go where it wants to. So this is a nice exercise to have a go with that sort of, and then work up to this sort of pinched lock of hair there. So when you're happy with the pen technique, or a single pencil, move on to a trio of pencils. So I've got a trio here. I've got a light pencil, a dark pencil, and then something in the middle. So it could be white, black, and a mid-grey. And I'm working on tone paper so that I can see the white showing up. You don't have to work on tone paper, you can work on white paper, but I think reducing to 3 pencils stops us with the overload of what colours to choose. At the moment, what we're doing is we're just practicing or getting our fluid motion. So with my mid-tone, so that pencil that's sort of in the middle, with my mid-tone, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to flick down and flick up. So I've created this sort of pinched lens there, or lock of hair. And then with my white pencil, I'm going to add some highlights in the middle. So I'm going to sort of connect it in the middle. And you can see that there's gaps naturally formed between those pencil marks that I made originally. So those mid-tones. And I can come in and I can fill some of those Still working quite rapidly. I can go back to my mid-tone, sort of feather it out, adjust my pressure a little bit, and then with my darker pencil I can start adding in some darker bits to the end. But you see how I'm sort of picking up any natural variation. I'm just sort of accentuating that. I'm making that sort of stand out. Flick that up like that and give it a few goes. So keep repeating that process. Again, letting the pencil almost go where it wants to. I think that's one of the things that we need to move away from, even if we're following a reference photo, is the idea that it's got to match the waves that we have in that photo. I'm just using those same strokes that we developed earlier, just those flicking strokes, and letting my hand go in with a bit of freedom, really. So I might decide to extend that highlight sort of coming down there, and then on this one I might add a little bit of dark just on there, and then maybe just on this side here. And you can see it's the same sort of shape. I've just extended it a little bit down at the bottom. I could do some little flicks over the top, and then when I've got those in, I can sort of draw around those a little bit. So we're building up to something a little bit more complicated, and then you can vary it a little bit by adding in different shapes, maybe go on the side, maybe miss the top bit out. So maybe we've got this bit of hair here that's sort of curved over and we're not even seeing the top of that pinch coming down. So for this one, I'd sort of start at the top here, just put a little bit of that mid-tone in. Then from the bottom, I'd do that flick again that we've been practicing, flick that up. I could even take that mid-tone a little bit further up, add in that highlight. And I think having a light pencil on a toned paper just helps us see those highlights. So it's far easier to draw the highlights in when you're practicing. And this is all about practicing moving the pencil, getting used to how you like to work. So there's my curls tend to go in the same direction. I find it quite difficult to do them sort of straight down like this one. I have to concentrate an awful lot more because I naturally want to, you can see I've stopped talking. I naturally want to put a bend in there. It's the way my hand sort of moves with it. And just being aware of what you find easier and more challenging with this. And yeah, just having a practice. And then when you're happy with 3 colours, start bringing in more colours, and then maybe start or more value changes, so more dark variation in your darks and lights. And then when you're happy with that, start looking for a photo and sort of doing something more realistic in terms of the actual colours you're seeing. So my advice would be to start with spare paper. I'm just using the back of an envelope here in this example. I've got a pen because that's handy for me. I tend to write with a pen. I don't use my pencils an awful lot for sort of writing, but same thing, you could use your pencils. Just practicing those sort of fluid strokes and how you sort of taper things off, and then how you soften and fade off in the middle. Start looking for little shapes that have been created in those little locks of hair. And then it'll be far easier then, as you start to draw more, to preserve those highlights. So if we were drawing on a white paper, what we tend to do is leave them like I have done in this one. So we wouldn't necessarily use the white that much. We'd maybe use it for a little bit of a resist, but it's not going to show up. But if you're used to seeing these shapes and adding those in, then it's less of a jump. So I hope you found that helpful.